Just the other day, Tucker Carlson reported on what he called, without a doubt, the most deranged story in history. And there's no question it is. It's going to stun you. What I want to do here is draw out for you the logic, indeed the pernicious and very vile logic that connects all the dots and makes sense of this deranged story. But you need to stick with me to the very end of this video to find out why this insidious leftist logic actually entails its own self-destruction. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you, as always. And speaking of being with you, I want to see you in person in Phoenix, Arizona for our next stop of the American Freedom Tour. I'll be there with Donald Trump Jr. and Candace Owens and Kayleigh McEnany on November 19th and 20th. And you can join me in Phoenix by simply clicking on the link below to register. To make it even sweeter, if you're one of the first 200 people to click on that link and register, you will be invited to our exclusive Friday Night Turley Talks live Q&A where we'll meet each other, and I'll even take one of you out for dinner. It's going to be awesome. Plus, just by registering, you're going to get some super amazing bonuses, including my best-selling book bundle, and the first 50 of you will get an official Turley Talks t-shirt. But tickets are going fast, so make sure to click on that link below right now, and I can't wait to see you in Phoenix. All right, let's dive right in here, gang. Tucker Carlson had a shocking segment on his show the other night exposing what he called the most deranged story in history. And we're going to make some sense of it, as well as find out how it's all going to blow up in the Democrats' face.
It's a bewildering experience working in cable news right now. Fun, but pretty unbelievable. Just about every morning, as we're putting this show together, some story from the Biden White House crosses our screens, and we think to ourselves, come on. There is absolutely no way that can be real. Please, it's just too crazy. And of course, pretty much every morning, what we had assumed was a joke turns out to be entirely real. It's actually happening. The Biden administration really is that crazy. They really are firing thousands of nurses in the middle of a pandemic, firing thousands of cops in the middle of a crime wave. No, they're not kidding even in the slightest when they tell you that's a genuine female four-star admiral standing right there. Joe Biden isn't giggling. He tells you Rachel Levine's promotion is a victory for women everywhere, and he means it when he says it. He means all of these things, even the ones he doesn't understand, which is most. As the guy who runs the Babylon Bee told us recently, it is getting tough to run a parody site in this country. No matter how creative your jokes may be, it is almost impossible to be more ludicrous than reality already is. And yet, even by those impossibly high standards, we can confidently announce tonight that we have just read the single most deranged news story ever printed in this country. So no matter what happens going forward, and God knows what that'll be, this story will live forever as the high watermark of political lunacy. Mark your calendars. It's October 28th, 2021. This is the day that things couldn't possibly get nuttier. And here it is. According to a piece in this afternoon's Wall Street Journal, the Biden administration has decided to pay reparations to illegal aliens. In other words, foreigners who came here without invitation, who came in willful violation of legal statutes passed by our Congress per our Constitution, those people are about to get a groveling apology and huge amounts of cash. Why? Because our government dared to enforce its own laws, which now apparently is immoral. So the Biden White House is going to pay criminals for committing crimes. It's almost impossible to believe that's real, but it is real. According to the Journal, the administration plans to, quote, offer immigrant families that were separated during the Trump administration around $450,000 a person in compensation. The U.S. Departments of Justice, Homeland Security, and Health and Human Services are considering payments that could amount to close to $1 million per family. $1 million per family for illegal aliens at exactly the moment that American families are becoming noticeably poorer by the day. You won't be surprised to learn, according to the paper, that nearly 1,000 reparations claims have already been filed. Why not? The total payout from all this? More than $1 billion. So how much is that exactly? Well, let's see. If you're an American citizen who is killed in a war defending your country, our government promises to send your family $100,000. That is less than a quarter of what Joe Biden intends to give illegal aliens for the inconvenience of being deported. They're once again getting $450,000 a piece from your tax receipts. That's more than some of the 9/11 victims got. It's more than any ordinary American ever gets for anything from the U.S. government. Most people in this country just give. Foreigners with no respect for our laws or systems, meanwhile, are hitting the jackpot.
Now, this is the article Tucker's referring to here, and it does indeed detail precisely that. The Biden administration is considering paying out hundreds of thousands of dollars per person for those illegal immigrants supposedly mistreated by the Trump administration's zero-tolerance border policies. In other words, following the law. It's nothing less than a parody of repulsiveness, but it's also par for the course for our globalist elites. And that's because while all this might sound utterly deranged, as Tucker rightly said, it actually makes total sense, at least from an elite globalist perspective like that held by what remains of Biden's cognitive faculties, and most especially his inner circle that are using his empty shell to impose their worldview on the rest of us. You see, globalism by its very nature is hostile to borders. You've got to get that. Globalism is hostile to borders. Globalism imposes a single one-size-fits-all political and economic system upon all nations. And part of the results of that is the erasure of borders and boundaries. Now, of course, without borders, there are no nations. Scholars have long recognized that globalism does indeed involve the eventual demise of the nation-state. Borders and boundaries have no place in a single one-size-fits-all political and economic system. But what Tucker is highlighting for us here is that the demise of the nation-state inevitably entails the demise of the notion of citizenship. For without nations, there can be no citizens. Victor Davis Hanson has done a masterful job of late in pointing out how citizenship is in fact eroding under the auspices of our globalist elite. And we're also finding that such an erosion is creating a bizarre sense of entitlement where non-citizens believe that they are just as entitled, if not more so, to the basic protections that citizenship historically entailed.
In the meantime, what can we know? Well, we can be certain how the rest of the world is going to see this announcement. Why wouldn't you cross our border illegally at this point? You'd have to be insane not to. Joe Biden is literally paying people who do it. So not surprisingly, as Fox's Griff Jenkins just reported, new waves of illegal migrants are coming here as fast as they can. Here's one caravan.
Chanting liberty, the caravan charges through a checkpoint as the Mexican National Guard stands by watching. The migrants, undeterred by Mexico's Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard, who says they are being deceived by the organizers.
They tell them, let's go in the caravan. We get to the U.S. and they will let us pass. It's not true. You saw what happened with the Haitians. It's the same thing.
But the warning isn't breaking the will of the migrants.
That's not stopping us, because we got the power of God right next to us, and he's going to open.
That is not going to stop us. We're still proceeding. We will still moving. It's not going to stop us.
We act like this is an act of God. We just can't stop it. But that's not what's happening. The Biden administration is actively encouraging this. And more so even today. The legislative framework that Democrats released today would give amnesty to millions and millions of illegal aliens. It's the largest amnesty proposed in the history of this country. The Center for American Progress, which is of course closely aligned with the Biden White House, released an analysis of this, and it concluded that nearly 7 million illegal aliens living here would get green cards under this proposal. Specifically, it would legalize anyone here illegally as long as that person could show he or she arrived in this country, follow this, between January 1st, 1972, during the first Nixon administration, and December 31st, 2009. That's a span of 47 years. Quite a strike zone. But what do you ask about the millions of illegals who've come here since 2009? Well, they're fine too, actually. The Biden administration has just put out a list of no-go zones, not places that foreigners who break our laws can't go. They can go anywhere, especially where you live. But a no-go zone for federal officers who are trying to enforce those laws. So ICE agents, according to the Biden White House, are no longer allowed to enter schools, hospitals, healthcare facilities, places of worship, playgrounds, child care centers, crisis centers, homeless centers, rehab facilities, food banks, disaster relief centers, funerals, parades, and many other places. Basically, they're not allowed anywhere. So that's it for immigration laws. They're done. They're totally ignored. They're totally unenforced. The question is, the one that's never asked by anybody, is how exactly do American citizens benefit from these changes?
Well, the obvious answer to that question is they don't. And that's because the death of citizenship entails the fact that there's no longer any distinction between Americans and non-Americans. So our government is now free to treat non-citizens even better than their own citizens. And the unfortunate outworking of this is that without the protections that were once guaranteed to us by virtue of our citizenship, deadly consequences can follow.
When Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd discusses this horrific car crash that killed a 5-year-old girl, the anger in his voice is hard to miss.
Had he been in his home country last Saturday night, like he should have been, our 5-year-old beautiful little girl would have been alive.
But instead, Ernesto Lopez Morales was driving down State Road 60 in Mulberry.
He has already drinking 6 32-ounce beers by his own admission.
And the sheriff says Lopez Morales was out buying more beer. We're told his headlights were off, he was speeding, and he slammed into the back of a Hyundai Elantra driven by a Plant City mother. The impact crushed the back half of the Elantra, including the back seat, where the 5-year-old was in her car seat.
Now, as tragic as that story is, it's but the logical outworking of a world where citizenship dies. And without citizenship, populations inevitably revert back to feudalism, which is precisely what's happening. Scholars call it re-feudalization. And the basic gist of it is that just as feudal societies were governed according to the norms and wishes of a privileged class, lords, nobles, dukes, and the like, so globalist societies are increasingly governed according to the interests and concerns and values of a permanent political class. But here's the key. Those values, interests, and concerns are becoming increasingly alienated from the values, interests, and concerns of the people, the populace. And this is what's driving the massive populist revolt that's rising up all over the world, a surge that Tucker himself recognized.
So take 3 steps back. You've got to wonder how long this sort of thing can continue. How long before the people who make this country run, who, by the way, are not the same people who run this country, those are two very different groups, but before the people who make this country run decide they have had enough and they're not going to take it anymore. Why pay your taxes at this point? Seriously. It's too insulting. It's too destructive. It is evil. Now, who knows how long it's going to take to get there, but at this rate, it's coming quick.
And it is coming. The day of reckoning for our globalist elites is indeed at hand. Make no mistake, in the end, Joe Biden's vision of the world will come crashing down. The only question is, how much damage will they do in the meantime? Now, before you go, make sure to check out my latest video on how President Trump and our Patriot GOP party have already seceded in all but name. You are not going to want to miss this video, so make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.